We've already looked at every single Halo game and ranked them based on the very first impression you get from the game, what the very first 10 minutes provide from the intro all the way through your first steps through Halo. But what if we flipped things around and we tried to rank every Halo game strictly on the last 10 minutes that you experience? What happens in those final moments of a story, from the final thing that you do gameplay wise through the ending cutscene that leaves the lasting impression on you? Which Halo game did this the best and which one did this the worst? Now, this one was challenging to actually pull off and try to come up with this list fairly, because we ended up having to play through the final level of each Halo game and then watch the final cutscenes, then back up and see where the 10-minute mark was, and then only base our decisions on all of our experiences strictly after that 10-minute mark opened up. So not only do we have to play this, we also had to review video footage multiple times to make sure we were strictly judging it on the final 10 minutes and nothing from before that. We're gonna go in order from our least favorite to what we think is the best final 10 minutes out of any Halo game. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, let's dive into our list by looking at the very bottom with the worst experience to maybe start things off with. Now remember, we're going into this as if we're a player with close to no Halo experience, say maybe walking into the room and just playing the last 10 minutes, whatever that experience may be, and then trying to rank these experiences based on just a very, very limited scope of time. Picking the absolute worst was actually more challenging than we expected it to be, because some Halo games have a lot more storytelling and cutscenes that fill up a lot of this 10-minute time period, where other Halo games have less overall cutscenes, which means more gameplay and more chances for variety. But the very bottom of this list is going to go to Halo 5 Guardians. I feel like even if you played through the entire campaign, the last 10 minutes of this game might still have you as confused as if you just walked into Halo 5 no context for the last 10 minutes. For this experience, it was actually really, really funny just imagining someone coming in no context and all of a sudden they're just like in a mantis and they're like, hey, you gotta shoot some things for a quick minute. No, hurry up inside. You have to come in here and just like sit around, and there's all this dialogue going on, a lot of confusing story elements. You fight a couple of things real quick and then you get locked in to this like animation sequence ending of the game that starts to kick off. There's really only a couple of minutes in total where you get to do much before the cutscene needs to take precedence, because that's the end of the game. We got Exuberant Witness, we got this giant Guardian thing that's going on here, then we got all this cutscene stuff going on where this squad of people are coming in to meet up with this squad of people, Halsey's here also, and then it leaves off on some giant cliffhanger ending. And for this video we will be including the legendary endings as well, and this one has a very brief one, but it's the Halo ring and Cortana humming, and then that's it. That's Halo 5. What an interesting place to jump into the Halo franchise with. I mean, Halo 5 already gets its criticisms for its story, but this is probably the worst way to experience Halo 5 technically. I bet not too many people fully expected this one to be on the list for the very next experience, but Halo Infinite is probably the next worst one after Halo 5 Guardians. At the very least, jumping in after subtracting the cutscene time that is needed, we're thrown right in to the beginning boss fight with the Harbinger herself, which is already a questionable thing. Like, we really don't even know too much about this character, and if you're jumping into Halo Infinite for the first time right here, you would know even less. This one does rank higher than Halo 5 Guardians because at the very least, you as a new player would at least realize you have an objective and you know what you're doing. You're just like fighting this thing. But other than that, the rest of your experience will be the cutscenes because it takes up the rest of your available time. This one's not the worst. We kind of end things off on this ambiguous, vague ending with a lot of things still unanswered. Apparently the weapon gets to pick her name, but we don't really know the context or what the name ends up getting picked to. There's some weird mystery about time dilation or something, and we have the cool pilot guy who's flying us to the next adventure. And then we get a post-credit scene, which is even confusing for most Halo fans, but it's leading things off onto an even bigger mystery, because I feel like if you had played the intro to Halo Infinite and then skipped straight to the end, you would think that this guy would be the main bad guy, even though he's not. But yeah, he's around there somewhere doing some stuff or something, and there might be some like AI AI talking to him or something. All right, so this isn't the worst way to jump into Halo, this new strategy of only looking at the last 10 minutes. I mean, we went from like kind of bad to okay pretty quickly, so now it's kind of a race for who's going to be the mid-tier ones to the greatest ones. Now for the next one, we ended up having to put quite a bit of thought into it, but ultimately I think we ended up choosing Halo 3 ODST for the next spot on this list. Now, Halo 3 ODST is easily my favorite Halo game in the franchise. That being said, I feel like the highlights and peaks of ODST are the experience you have going through the city at night and the journey you travel on as the rookie. Comparatively speaking, the final 10 minutes you experience in ODST are really just the conclusion and the ending after the climax and all of the excitement and everything else that happened prior. We found ourselves in the firefight section around the second wave of enemies coming in at the end, where we hold out waiting for the rest of the ODST team to come and pick us up. And you do get a little bit of fun kind of holding out. It kind of reminded us of the old firefight mode from ODST back in the day, which is always a fun time. Challenge-wise, there's not too much really going on. It's not that hard to survive here, especially because Virgil's giving you shields, so you don't even have that like, oh, you're weaker than a Spartan feeling in this final firefight. And then from there, we finally, after killing all the enemies, get picked up by the boys. We fly off and live happily ever after. That's what happens. Nothing bad happens to any of these guys, especially Rookie. From there, we get the little cool cutscene of them flying off, reminding us that this is a Dante's Inferno reference.
What can I say? Was a hell of a night.
Then there's some little extra bonuses at the end of the game. We get to see an appearance of Sergeant Johnson, suggesting that he and Virgil become best friends. And then there's a cool post-credits scene showing the Prophet of Truth, revealing that he found the location of Forerunner's thing that gives them a portal to the Ark. This is a cool reveal. However, the fact that ODST did come out after Halo 3, we kind of already know that this whole thing occurs. So it's teasing Halo 3 in a weird way since it released 2 years after Halo 3. We really figured out that there's probably more subtle imagery going on here involving the Dante's Inferno stuff, but we've talked about that plenty of times before. This is a solid ending to a Halo game. However, the competition gets really stiff with all the other Halo games, so it's just gonna sit here in the placement that we chose for it. This next one might surprise some of you, but we actually ended up choosing Halo 4 here. Now, we're pretty harsh on Halo 4 from time to time because we feel like the storytelling was all over the place. However, we have praised Halo 4 for some interesting storytelling bits that kind of get bogged down by some of the other narrative decisions that were made. The good thing about this ending and finale is it is very long, which means it has the least amount of gameplay pretty much than any other Halo game on this list. We're literally thrown right in when Master Chief is in the middle of the fight with the Didact at the very end. And honestly, if you were either a brand new player, knew nothing about Halo, or a returning player who didn't want to play Halo 4, I feel like this last 10-minute segment is like a really positive way to showcase what goes on in Halo 4 and get someone caught up to speed. The Didact's involvement in Halo 4's plot and his whole characteristics and storytelling seemed more as a distraction to the core focus of Halo 4's story, which is the theme of human versus machine, and we see that throughout all of the narrative, especially with this contrast of Cortana, a machine with human characteristics, and Master Chief, a human with machine characteristics. This juxtaposition of their real identities is what is kind of central here, and in the cutscenes that play out with the two having to come to terms with the fate that they are inevitably faced with, this is where Halo 4 actually does something really cool in this conversation that Cortana and Chief briefly get to have. I think people who absolutely love Halo 4, and even people who are more critical of Halo 4, can point out that some things can be done well, and I think that this section of the ending is done pretty well at the very least. Then the scenes following that are a little bit less focused. We do have some more dialogue between Chief and Latsky, which kind of drives the point home a bit more. We get to see some of the aftermath of the damage caused from the events of Halo 4, which never really get brought up again later on. Obviously, we can't fault that in this specific video. And then we get the final cutscene of Master Chief being essentially stripped of his armor piece by piece until we see in the Legend legendary ending, his eyes, which represent the humanity of Master Chief still being there underneath that suit of armor, at least maybe to an extent. It's left in a very ambiguous tone, but I kind of like the fact that that's how Halo 4 ended. Now, I wish they did anything, literally anything, with this narrative thread differently than what they actually did. But like we said, if we were containing everything to just 10 minutes, this is a solid way to end Halo 4. We just wish the journey up to it would have been different, and the gameplay would have also been maybe a little different. You see, I can be nice to Halo 4 sometimes. Okay, that leaves us with just 4 spots left. So coming in 4th place on our list, we're gonna go ahead and give this one to Halo 2. Now, all throughout Halo 2 is praised as having some of the strongest narrative storytelling in franchise history. But way back in the day when Halo 2 released, there was no denying the fact that it was controversial the campaign ended on a cliffhanger. This was a talking point for years. This was like the Sprint debate, but in message boards back in like 2004 and 2005. Everybody had their opinion on the fact that Halo 2 ended on this cliffhanger and didn't finish out the story that had been so carefully crafted from the beginning all the way till where the game inevitably ended. People stopped caring about the cliffhanger ending and like the way that Halo 2's story was handled much more after Halo 3 obviously released, because we did get a conclusion to the narrative events. People can't help but to wonder what would have been different if Halo 2 would have had those final chapters that ended up getting cut because the game development was running so tight. But all that aside, when we look at the final 10 minutes of Halo 2, I still think the ending is really, really strong, but I understand the criticisms as well. To start things off, we get the final boss fight between the Arbiter and Tartarus. And considering the fact that Halo 2 wouldn't see a finale where we get to finish off all of the prophets with the Prophet of Truth getting killed in some way or another, Tartarus was a really good consolation prize for having to fight at the end of Halo 2. It did give a lot of closure to the arc that the Arbiter specifically went on, where he went from essentially killing those who went against the prophets to essentially turning on the Covenant altogether, you know, after getting betrayed himself. All of the Halos getting fired off from the Halo 2 ring get stopped. We get some teases about the arc being a thing that would be in the future Halo game. And then we get whipped around to Master Chief talking with Lord Hood. And while I always thought it was a little weird that Halo 2 didn't end with a Master Chief level, Master Chief still gets a badass moment before the credits roll. And then since we are testing this in MCC, we don't include the time that the credits would normally be on the screen as a part of the 10 minutes for this video. So the last bit of time we have left gives us that special epilogue where we know that Cortana is trapped there on High Charity with Gravemind, and it insinuates that something crazy might happen in Halo 3. We never really dig into that as much as I wish we could have. Once again, something I think Halo 4 could have done really interestingly. But nonetheless, all things considered, Halo 2 still has a very, very epic story told in its final 10 minutes, and it is a good enough closure to the second act of the Halo trilogy, so I think it is deserving of its place here in 4th place. For the next one on the list, we're looking at Halo Combat Evolved, which actually has a decent amount of gameplay compared to the other Halo games because the ending cutscene is quite a bit shorter than some of the other ones. Rewinding back in time 10 minutes from the very end of the game, of course excluding the credits once again, this actually had us picking up right in the beginning part of the engine room. And you know what? For the mixed gameplay you get from this point of the game to the end, it's actually pretty cool. I think if you were playing through Halo and you tell your friend, hey, my other friend just left, come join me and help me finish up Halo Combat Evolved, I think that other friend getting the first impression based on these final 10 minutes would be actually pretty positive. You get to walk around a bit, shoot some stuff, you get these grenade throws that are supposed to be easy, except they never really go that well. When Dim and I were initially running through this, just to get an idea of what we would talk about for this video, Dim was like, yeah, we could totally, you know, cruise through the engine room in like a minute's time. I was like, a minute? You obviously don't play this level the way I play, because part of the level's experience is missing your grenades, having to fall off the thing because you messed up where you were jumping, having to backtrack into the armory to get more ammo. We're trying to base our times on an average play experience, so we were kind of picking this part as it was somewhere in the middle. Later on, Luke and Sauce went to go get footage of these last 10 minutes to kind of corroborate our findings, and I don't know, they were doing things weird over there. Nonetheless, there is a lot to like in this part. It is kind of epic and intense. You have no idea what's going on. Cortana's talking about something called a wildcat destabilization realization, which I don't even think is a real term. But then we get the Warthog run, and this thing was so cool back in the day as an ending note for Halo Combat Evolved, just to have something that's so theatrical, over the top, but something that you get to experience, and you actually have to kind of try to get through the course in the allotted amount of time. It's pretty fun, and just driving through this part, even with the wonky Halo Warthog physics, isn't all that bad. There are a few sections where there's maybe not the clearest path. You have to just race your way through, and you have to kind of weave through some stuff. And then there's, you know, some skill that can go into that, or you can just kind of crash and bump your way through it and maybe still survive if you're lucky. Then you can follow that up with the big twist where you think you're going to escape on a pelican, and then, you know, that doesn't work. And then you're kind of down to the wire in this big final drive section, and you have to make sure you're going to not, you know, die, and you have this big jump that you go off of, and then a foot race to the finish. It's really, really a cool ending for a game that came out in 2001, and I think that it deserves the praise for the way that this ending served as the real cinematic peak of Halo Combat Evolved, more so than just putting all of the cool stuff in a cutscene. The cutscene afterwards is pretty basic. It's just Master Chief just talking to Cortana. She alludes to some other person named Dustin Echoes or someone who survived somehow. I never really understood who that was. And then we get to see Master Chief finally take off his helmet just as the camera pans away out of view, solidifying the mystery of what Master Chief's face looks like. I mean, I'm sure before this people already wondered what his face would have looked like, but now the fact that they took his helmet off makes you only wonder even more. A solid way to wrap up the first Halo game, alluding to the fight just beginning or just getting started. But wait, there's more. In the legendary ending, we get this version of the cutscene where Johnson and an elite appreciate each other. It's definitely a good ending. Okay, moving on to Halo Reach. Now, imagine this, just, you know, blank slate here. No context, Halo Reach, you go in, you turn on your game, and you start it up in the final 10 minutes of the game. Where does that land you? Let's pretend you know nothing about the story whatsoever. You're just trying to figure out what this Reach game that you picked up at Blockbuster is about. You turn on your game, and you're greeted to this cutscene. Yeah, it's just Emil getting a sword right through his chest. I mean, that's a pretty cool way to kick things off, and then we have a really intense next 10 minutes. We have to make a run back up to the Mac gun, and there's some really challenging elites that kind of block the way, like some of the hardest elites in the entire game. So besides just kind of having to fight those guys real quick, then you get this epic giant Mac gun cannon fight where you realize that you're staying behind to clear way for the Pelican or something, clear the skies and save the day, and you're left behind to go hide in a cave or something. I mean, not really. Actually, from there we get the final level, which is Lone Wolf, and technically this level can go on forever, so we had to kind of pick a good stopping point that still would include as part of the experience, but also not just like drag on forever, because nobody just typically played the ending forever over and over and over again. And we wanted to include obviously as much as we could. We found around 2.5 minutes into Lone Wolf, these like really strong elites come in, and I feel like that's probably a part where you realize that, like, you know, this isn't just killing grunts anymore. Like, some big enemies come in and kind of mess up your day a little bit. And there was always something so eerie and ominous about that final fight that you go into, where your screen fades to black, and then all of a sudden we're taken into this cutscene and just see Noble 6 really just hanging in there after dude comes in to try to kill him. While he goes down fighting, swinging, and taking out some along the way, he does end up going down, and it cuts away to showing your helmet there. Halo Reach was always a game where from the beginning you knew how it was supposed to end. We didn't want it to be true, but we knew that this would happen. We then see the beginning sequence of Halo Combat Evolved, along with a little eulogy of Noble 6, and the cutscene kind of insinuates that had Noble Team not made the sacrifices that they did, the universe and the whole story of Halo wouldn't have happened. And that, you know, wouldn't it be cool, I guess? The whole, like, known universe or the known area would have been destroyed by those Halo rings? Probably. I don't know how the what if stuff happens. I like this one. If you're not a fan of Warthog runs, this is probably as good as it gets, so there's really nothing to criticize with Halo Reach. It's kind of just a really polished, perfected ending here. I'm just blinded by nostalgia a little bit more on the next one, so that's why it's second place, but otherwise it's a solid final 10 minutes. But then we get into Halo 3. Now, not only only are these last 10 minutes special because they were the ending of such a fun campaign, so focused on having such fun gameplay throughout, but it also in a way was a culmination of the entire trilogy ending, so there is a lot more weight on the shoulders of Halo 3 to do something bigger and better than anything before it. Now, in general, the cutscenes with the legendary ending actually clock in pretty long, about 7 minutes in time, but if we back up into the level of gameplay itself, it had us picking up at the Warthog run about halfway through, right when the Sentinels are flying and shooting at us. So kind of when you get to the real crazy part where the panels are like falling quicker than ever, things are going crazy, and in general, this is just such an epic climax to the Halo trilogy where the Halo music's just going full force. You're driving, things are exploding, you're with your friends or maybe the Arbiter, and you're just trying to shoot and get through things. There's this cool part where when you're driving around the corner, you think you're going to keep going straight, but then this giant pillar falls and just wipes out everything in front of you and you have to make a turn around the rock. All of this is so cool, and it leads up to one final ramp that you have to drive off of to launch into the hangar of the Forward Unto Dawn. This is by far the coolest way to end a Halo game. This was one of the campaign experiences I had with a friend that made me interested in playing through all of the campaigns. I remember going back and just replaying this level because the driving section was so much fun, and it literally is just such a cool experience in Halo. And whenever like one of my friends who doesn't care about the story just wants to see what Halo's about, this isn't the worst level to show them sometimes. Make them drive, make them figure it out. It can be a lot of fun. Now, without the legendary ending, the ending cutscene itself would have probably fallen a little flat. It just kind of insinuates that after this whole ordeal inside of the hangar and the ship gets split apart, that only the Arbiter made it and Master Chief was dead, if it were so easy, or whatever the Arbiter says. But the legendary ending was a really big deal. This is the thing that people would look up online if they couldn't beat it on legendary difficulty themselves as a kid. But it has some cool dialogue between Master Chief and Cortana, acknowledging the situation they're in, acknowledging that they did it, that they beat everything, and that they would be away for a long time. And one day, maybe they'll be needed again and they'll be brought back out of hibernation, but for now, this would be goodbye to Master Chief and Cortana. And in the same way that Halo Combat Evolved started with Master Chief waking up in his pod, symbolically speaking here, Master Chief goes back to sleep in his pod, thus concluding the circle and ending the story of the Master Chief forever. Not only was this a cool way to just wrap up Halo with Master Chief at the center of it all, it also paid a big homage to the series that influenced Halo greatly, Marathon, where the Marathon series is known for having a character much like the Master Chief waking up on a ship after being in cryosleep for years to just a bunch of stuff going on and rampant AIs and all this stuff. So in a way, it was kind of bringing the story full circle as a spiritual prequel in a sense to the game that inspired everything. It's just a cool little nod that Bungie did there. And had Master Chief continued to stay asleep forever, as he does in the Bungie timeline, obviously then that reference would still be intact and not kind of broken up the way that it is nowadays. Still, overall, Halo 3's ending was amazing, and I think it's deserving at the #1 spot on this list. But what do you guys think? Do you completely disagree with me on any of these? That's completely fair. Just let me know in the comments. I'll read the comments. I'm curious to see what you guys think. Also, a huge shout out to our patrons. Thanks so much to everyone who's been supporting our channel, helping us make videos like this. If you guys got a couple dollars burning a hole in your pocket, you know, you could sign up for our Patreon at the cost of like a coffee or something, and that actually goes a long way in helping our content. So maybe consider that. But otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed if you're new. That's it for today. We'll see you next time with a brand new video.